Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing another movie review for you all. This movie is a horror film from France, French language English subs, released in the year 2021, directed by Julia Ducournau, and this film is called Titane. So Titane is about this young girl. She has a horrible car crash. Her father was the driver, but they've both lived. So they survived the ordeal, but then as they grow older, this young girl has developed these serious injuries that has caused her to have psychopathic tendencies as a young adult. So she's a dancer at this club that specialises in cars. So when people go and look at the cars, they can also have a look at the dancers. And so she's a very popular dancer, but it turns out that she's a very dangerous person. So she doesn't have a specific residence. She travels from place to place, but pretty soon the police are on her tail. So she actually meets another person, and this person changes her life, but whether or not it changes it for the good or the bad is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Titane. I wanted to love this movie more than anything because I really like Julia Ducournau. She made a movie called Raw that was incredibly thought-provoking. A lot of people walked out when they saw it in the festival circuit, and so that gave them a lot of notoriety. It was a very extreme film, and it really put a new wave French extremity on the map. So that was a movie that I could really remember. It had some scenes that really burned into the memory, and so coming into Titane, I thought, alright, I wanted this movie to be just as good as Raw. And so I had my hopes because a lot of people actually gave this movie a standing ovation after it actually screened in a lot of festivals, and so for that I had expectations that were very, very high, and I was hoping, fingers crossed, that this was going to be another knockout experience. And after watching Titane, I will say that I was incredibly disappointed by this movie, and that's something that's going to be a little bit controversial because a lot of people absolutely salivate over this film. They say it's brilliant, but I definitely feel as though the art house sort of bizarre approach to this movie can actually cloud a little bit of judgment, and that's something I'll go into a little bit later. But what I liked about Titane is that it has a really awful sort of atmosphere, awful in a really good way, because it makes you feel very depressed, it makes you feel very dirty, and that's the same sort of environment that Raw created. So psychologically, this director really knows what it takes to actually make you feel very uncomfortable, and so the movie has a very grey sort of palette. The characters are very dreary and downbeat, and there's no real positivity in this movie. And so there are some themes that the movie depicts that I thought were fairly interesting, although, as I said, there are issues that I had with it that actually clouded those the thought-provoking material. But I will say that as far as cinematography is concerned, it is actually very, very impressive. It's a very, very extreme film. There is a high-impact sexual themes to this movie, and the way that this director uses those sexual themes is going to be very controversial. A lot of people are going to feel very, very uncomfortable. For me, I appreciate the fact that it pushed the boundaries. I can understand why some people didn't like this movie because of the extremity, and as I said, any French horror film that is a French extreme film is good in my book because it puts the new wave of French horror back on the map. But this is a film that's definitely for a very acquired taste. The overall story to this movie didn't feel like it had a lot of control, and it is incredibly bizarre. So there does have some pretty shocking violence, but it's the sexual themes that's really going to take audiences by surprise. So the movie does have that nasty heart, and the movie does have a somewhat thought-provoking heart, but unfortunately it just gets lost in its storytelling because it wants to be so bizarre and so shocking that it clouds everything else. So the story, to me, it felt very, very all over the place. It was very, very disjointed, and I never really gravitated to any of these characters whatsoever because it was a world that was downbeat and depressing. It was a world where these characters had hardships, and this is a movie about, the sense of trauma and your sense of belonging, and so being accepted, all that kind of stuff I thought was very good. But unfortunately there are some scenes in this movie that just took me by surprise in the way that I just left thinking, what on earth is going on? So you have these shocking moments, but then unfortunately that overshadows the overall story. And so I thought the story was simple enough, but the movie just packed on all of this bizarre quality that you just get lost, and I just felt as though I really wasn't going on the ride because I felt disorientated in a way that I couldn't really follow it. And so a lot of people were praising this, as I said, for being a very different film, and it is a very different film, but I just felt as though it didn't have as much control as Raw did. So the movie goes on, and as it goes on, it gets darker and a lot more weirder. And for me, I just thought as though, alright, you're just putting things on there just for shock value, and this is the cheap shot of shock that I really don't like, and that's the cheap shot of shock that was non-existent in Raw. So this movie has a really far out story, but I thought as though it could have been contained a little bit more, and it could have told the story a lot better, because I can't understand what this movie is trying to tell, but unfortunately it's those really far out balls to the wall crazy scenes that I just thought didn't really work for me. And so that's the only issue I had. That's the issue I had with this movie. I didn't like it as much as a lot of other people did, and fair enough, each to their own. If you love this movie, then please feel free to share your opinion. But for me, it's just too weird for its own good. It just tries way too hard to be out of left field and to shock an audience. And yes, you will remember it through the visuals, but unfortunately you won't remember it through the actual story. I just thought as though the story was very disjointed, it was very clouded, and I just thought as though it needed to take a back seat as far as the extremity is concerned, because in the end what you get is just a mess of a movie. So overall for Titane, I'm only going to give this one 1.5 stars. I really didn't like this film. I wanted to love it, but if I'm being brutally honest, it really came up short, and that's something that really disappointed me. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later.